Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. On behalf of USAID Advancing Nutrition and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, thank you so much for joining us today for the fifth FIND COP, or the Family Inclusion and Nutrition Through Engagement Community of Practice. My name is Neha Javeri. I'm a social behavior change specialist with USAID Advancing Nutrition. So today's session will focus on adapting and learning when engaging family members in nutrition. We'll start off the meeting with a presentation on siblings' roles in infant and young child feeding and care in rural Tanzania, after which we'll have a few minutes to take any questions you may have. And then we'll move into small groups to discuss program adaptation and for sharing of your own experiences. So I'm excited to introduce Morgan Boncyk, who's a first-year doctoral student at the University of South Carolina's Arnold School of Public Health. She has conducted research in Kenya and Tanzania on family food environments, drivers of food choice, COVID-19 impacts on food systems, and siblings' roles in optimal nutrition for infants and young children. She earned her BS in nutrition and MPH in health statistics from Purdue University. Her doctoral work will explore and evaluate the food environment within the family unit to inform more inclusive transformational efforts targeted at improving food choices for a healthier population. So now, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Morgan to begin her presentation.
And then can you share the slides, please?
Give me one moment, Morgan.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for that introduction. My name is Morgan Boncyk. I am a first-year doctoral student at the University of South Carolina. Today, I will be presenting to you the role that siblings play in infant and young child feeding and care in rural Tanzania. Next slide, please. Often, interventions and programs to improve infant and young child feeding and care practices target mothers, while emerging work has begun to include grandmothers and fathers in these programs, little is known about other members of the family unit. In Africa, the anthropology literature has found that siblings are important caregivers within the family. Few studies have characterized the caregiving role and practices of older children and adolescents, determinants of their engagement in caregiving, or the extent to which children and siblings affect a child's early nutrition and development. We posit that interventions and programs to improve IYCF and care practices may have reduced impact by only targeting mothers. Next slide. There is a need to know who takes care of the child, under what circumstances, and what types of care they provide. This includes grandparents, neighbors, and siblings. We wanted to inform more inclusive and comprehensive interventions and programs. Our new research on siblings was limited in the literature, so we focused on this for our analysis. With this, we aim to address these gaps by identifying caregiver activities siblings perform for younger children in the household, differences in task based on age and gender of the sibling, and determinants of sibling engagement in IYCF and care. Next slide. This study took place at the baseline of the effects cluster randomized trial that engaged fathers' engagement in child nutrition and nurturing care outcomes across 960 households. I provided a link to the webinar explaining this trial and its results on nutrition and stimulation outcomes in more depth. Next slide. The sibling study was nested within effects, using cross-sectional data before any intervention took place. Interviews occurred during our formative research in the summer of 2018 for the larger intervention. However, I used it to inform the development of a two-part questionnaire that assessed the role of older siblings in IYCF and care. The survey was pilot tested before being administered to 960 mothers in early 2019. Mothers identified the most involved sibling or adolescent in the household between the age of 7 and 17 years that cared for the index child who was 0 to 18 months at baseline. We use this age minimum as the age of ascent, given the variability of recall accuracy for younger children seen in the literature. Next slide. The questionnaire was administered to mothers regarding their older child's involvement in IYCF and care at baseline. As shown, these questions covered caregiving, involvement in food preparation, types of foods fed, and types of meals that were fed by the sibling to the infant or young child. Additionally, a sibling questionnaire was developed that paralleled the questions asked to the mother survey. I will here only present the results from that mother form. Next. Over half of households reported engaging a sibling or adolescent in IYCF and care. The histogram plot here shows that siblings who reported to be most involved in IYCF and care based on their age and gender. While we only surveyed adolescents between the age of 7 and 17 years, you can see most children were engaged during their younger years. We had a median age of 10 years and almost 40% of the most involved sibling were boys, with higher involvement during their younger years. 10% of the most involved in care were non-sibling adolescent relatives. Next. Many individuals were involved in caring for the infant: parents, grandparents, siblings, and community members. During the qualitative interviews, a father in his late 50s noted that it's a community effort to raise the child, and the brothers and the sisters play a role. Next. We wanted to identify how household factors differed based on the engagement of an older child in IYCF and care. This table presents the characteristics of households with sibling care, with siblings not engaged in care, and those without a sibling 7 to 17 years of age in the household. The median household size was 8 members among households with a sibling engaged in IYCF and care. We found that sibling caregivers were more common in larger households and when the mother was older. The infant had significantly higher 7-day dietary diversity when an older sibling was involved in care. However, there was not a significant difference for 1-day dietary diversity. We did not find wealth indicators, infant age, or food insecurity to predict sibling engagement. Next slide. We examined the association of age and gender of the sibling with the type of care they provided to infants and young children from the baseline survey. Out of the 960 households, 490 had sibling care. This table shows the type of caregiving activity by age and gender. The typical sibling was involved in 6 of the 9 caregiving tasks, with 85% of siblings involved in feeding or providing food or beverages to their younger sibling. Generally, we found that caregiving tasks such as feeding, dressing, and washing had significantly higher involvement by older children and girls. Meanwhile, babysitting tasks such as responding to cries and helping to fall asleep did not have a difference in involvement based on age or sex. Next. Over 90% of the infants were still breastfed, and nearly all the siblings recognized when their infant or young child wanted breast milk. Siblings would bring the child to their mother or provide an alternative food or beverage. Girls were more likely to provide an alternative. Next slide. This table presents results on the exact type of food provided by siblings by age and gender. Over half of siblings provided main meals, which were more prevalent among older siblings. Over half of this, almost all engaged in providing beverages with a higher likelihood from girls than boys. Less than 10% of siblings handled medical treatment for the younger infant, with older girls significantly more likely to do so. The most common foods fed by siblings included grains, roots, and tuber, vegetables, beans, and sauces, and meats and fishes. Older siblings were more likely to provide dairy and candy. Next slide. Gender and age-specific involvement in tasks were highly apparent in food preparation. We found 3 out of every 5 siblings involved in food preparation, with significantly higher involvement by siblings older in age and girls in all food preparation tasks. Next. For example, here is one adolescent girl who explains how, as she got older, she was more involved in food preparation and was relied more on for feeding the infant when available. However, parents recognized that the age of the sibling caregiver mattered, as this mother indicated how a community health worker is aware of sibling involvement in care and how it led to poor health outcomes of the infant. Nevertheless, families relied on siblings for caregiving due to time constraints, and thus siblings had high involvement in IYCF and care, regardless of their ability to provide adequate care. For instance, this mother in her late 20s indicated having the infant with her sibling when she went to church, the market, or work. Next slide. To test this, parents' time use was examined as a potential determinant of sibling involvement. Parents were categorized into quartiles based on total daily time use on common activities using an adapted IFPRI Women's Empowerment and Agricultural Index. We found that busier mothers and fathers were significantly more likely to engage a sibling in IYCF and care. We also looked into parents' activities while siblings cared for younger children. We found that most provided care while the parent was working on the farm or garden, and this effect varied by sibling's age. Parents would have a sibling watch the infant while performing other duties rather than leisure activities. However, when leisure occurred, it was more commonly sisters than brothers caring for the infant. Next slide. In conclusion, we found that siblings play a prominent role in IYCF and care practice. Determinants of sibling engagement included which caregiver task was performed, the age and gender of the sibling, household demographics such as parental age and family size, and the time burden of the mother and father. Given this evidence, there is need to think through the methodological and ethical challenges in intervention development, considering that siblings provide a large role in infant care. Education can be offered to older children and adolescents through schools to increase knowledge and health practices, IYCF, and care among older children of both genders to provide them an opportunity to apply this knowledge to their younger sibling and their future family. Future interventions should consider a family-based approach that teaches proper nutrition and care practices to youth to help them achieve a better future. This work would require awareness of cultural beliefs that can affect the interpretation of the message and clearly target both boys and girls. Next slide. I wanted to thank the Effect Study participants, study team, and funders. Thank you to Dr. Nulupa Gunaratna and Dr. Ramya Ambagapathy for their mentorship and guidance throughout this project. And I've provided my contact information and encourage you to reach out to me to discuss using a more comprehensive household unit in future work.
Thank you so much, Morgan, for the lovely presentation. I found the breakdown of the types of foods siblings provided by age and gender, the sibling reaction to the child wanting breast milk particularly interesting, And I think you also chose some great quotes that really gave us a better sense of the sibling caregiver involvement. So thank you so much once again. We will now open the floor for questions and follow-up. If you have a question you would like to ask, feel free to share it in the chat or come off of mute. To kick off the Q&A, I will turn it over now to Altrina Mercuria-Ash, a senior technical advisor with USAID Advancing Nutrition, and she herself has also done work and research related to engaging family members in nutrition. So over to you, Altrina.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. I'm so excited about this topic. I think that we have overlooked or neglected sibling caretakers, and so thank you so much for that presentation on what young people, siblings are doing within families. Welcome everybody. I see that we have folks here from Tajikistan, Tanzania, Uganda, Madagascar. We have folks working in RIPSAs and various universities here in the US and development partners. So I expect that we will have a lively discussion from various perspectives, from on the ground implementation to global to academic. So please, if you have a question, could you please, since we're a small group, you can just come off mute and ask your question, or if you want to put it in the chat. So I see a question in the chat. I see a couple of questions in the chat. Kate, did you want to start off with your question, please?
Sure. I mean, I was just thinking that we've known that this is happening. And one of the concerns is that if we educate siblings, that encourages siblings to be involved in this, which I think depends on age, as was shown in the presentation. And I really appreciated that Morgan talked about targeting kids at school and targeting both boys and girls. But I was just wondering, given the higher rates of caregiving by older girls, are they in school, or is there a tendency for girls in this area not to continue to complete their education?
So our questionnaire did not particularly ask about education level of the child, but our qualitative work did show that when a sibling was involved in care, the parents first considered their school schedule, and then when they were available outside of school, that's when they would provide care. So a parent would do more domestic work while the child was at school, and then the child came home from school, would take care of the infant while the parent would go outside of the household to do other tasks.
Right. I think the problem is, as you progress in school, you need a lot of time outside of school to complete your homework. And so I didn't know if there was any sort of national data, whether that had, generally it's pretty common that girls are not able to complete their schooling to the same level at certain stages of development. So I hope that that's not the case in Tanzania, but it is a concern always.
Yeah. And like I said, we have very limited data on the education level of the sibling, but what we do have is that they were still in school. And our qualitative was age ranged of 10 to 15 for that sibling, who were all still in school or at least completed their primary school.
Great. Let's move on to Lisa. You had a question?
Oh, thanks, Altrina. That was the same question, basically, like, how do we avoid programs sanctioning more of this by that engagement of children caregivers? It's a question we've been grappling with for a long time, so I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts.
Yeah, just, and I hope other people have more insightful ideas, but we were just kind of hypothesizing having the sibling learn about these practices in school, not to care for the infant themselves, but to help with their future family. So kind of like home ec courses, you don't really learn the skills for now, but you learn them for use in later in life. And then they can be involved and use this knowledge right away while they're caring for their sibling, especially those that are involved in food preparation, because there's a whole issue of food safety. And then making sure that they're bettering their health for themselves as well.
Thank you. Let's hear from the field. Bolin Risoa, forgive me for mispronouncing your name. You had a question, you had a comment.
Yeah, you pronounced well my name. Yes, we are here in the DRC, and this is a real concern for a long time since we started the program. There's a research, like a report done by Care International about it, and it's in some cases, I say that the sibling even bring the child with them to school because there's really no one to take care of the child. Well, the mother needs to go to the field, to farm, to market, to the fields. Farming, sometimes it becomes farther and further from the village because they have to find water. They have to really look for other better farm sites. And then we were trying to discuss and advise and consult with the community members. We were thinking, what about like a nursery, like a group nursery where all, a grandmother or just aunties or others who group together the children in one place for feeding or for just taking care of them. And then there's the issue of witchcraft. The families would not really let other family members that they don't know to take care of their children. They are afraid about the food, the poisoning that people may do to the children. And then the other issue is the distance, and then of course the organization of the communities to going to take care of the food and how they group the food. So yeah, it's a real concern, and of course the answers is not really clear to date. So I would really appreciate to hear from others what are their thoughts about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think you raised some really good points about other forms of childcare with a group setting and so on to relieve the children, the sibling caretakers, but also I think Morgan brought in about by caretaking of your younger siblings, you're learning about parenting and how to properly take care of a child and feed them and so on. So you want to make sure they have good practices too, but at the same time, it was mentioned about taking them out of school in order to do this. So finding that balance. Has anyone on the line have any experience with or other comments about how to address this in a more balanced way? Or even other challenges? Carolyn, you had a question about disabilities. Thank you for bringing that up too. Would you like to share?
Thanks, Altrina. I was just asking if the study had included any considerations around disability, and particularly if caregiver siblings, were doing anything different or were required to provide more care in the case of a child with disabilities. But Morgan clarified that that wasn't part of the study parameters, but would be a really interesting topic, I think, for a future use of the tool.
Yeah, excellent, because we know that children with disabilities require additional care, and then who was providing that would be really good to know. Janet, you raised a comment about workload. Please share your comment with us. Women's workload. Janet, are you there? Or are you on mute? Well, while Janet is trying to join us, okay, there you are.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Yeah, no, I was asking if what is the recommendation coming from this study, because this is a chronic problem, I can say, especially in Tanzania. So I was wondering if there is any recommendation that can be helpful for us to, like, as we think about programming, if there is anything that we can think about to reduce this problem here in Tanzania, for example. And also maybe to add on that, I wonder also if the study looked into when these siblings are being involved in child caring. Is it over the weekends? Is it all the time? Is it, that kind of questions? Over.
I'm going to answer your question, Janeth, verbally, just because I was typing it in the chat and it just got lengthy. For the first part on time burden of the parents, we found that siblings are involved, and they're more involved when the parent has a higher time burden, doing chores, work, fetching water, firewood. But the amount of involvement that a sibling being involved or not did not change the amount of time that a parent was busy. So think about a mom is going to go work on her farm. If the sibling is present, the sibling can watch the infant. If not, she'll strap the child on her back and still complete her work. So it kind of just provides more ease to their current workload, but it doesn't necessarily reduce the amount of work that they have to do. And then the second part as to when, our study tool that we created did include a question that asked about, is it during the weekends, after school, before school, all the time? And our survey was pilot tested, but there was a lot of unclarity when it was actually conducted in the field as to responses to that question. And so we try to analyze that data, and it was just unclear itself. So definitely future work using this tool will have to rephrase that question in particular to get more accurate responses. And the tool will be published. So it will be out there, both the mothers and the siblings forum.
Great. Thank you. I hate to cut off the discussion. There are more questions here, but we're going to go into breakout rooms where we can go more in depth and